Good day, everyone, and welcome to the third and final installment of the 9th Annual Analytics Summit Virtual Edition, brought to you by the University of Cincinnati's Center for Business Analytics, a part of the Lindner College of Business. I'm Glenn Wagren. I'm the Executive Director of the Center, and together with Dr. Mike Fry, the Center's Academic Director, and the Center staff, we're all delighted to be able to bring to you a part of the live event, which has really become a must-attend event here in Cincinnati for business leaders, analytic practitioners, students, and faculty to meet, hear, see, and learn about the successes and the challenges to drive value in the practical application of analytics across industries and disciplines. Now, as I mentioned, we're honored to have several Tableau Zen Masters join us today to address our theme, Visualizing Unexpected Events. Now, with us today are Steve Wexler from Data Revelations, Chloe Seng from Viz for Social Good, and Chantilly Juggernauth from Lovalytics as our speakers. Now, following a similar format as in our previous webinars, we'll first meet each of these speakers, say hi to them, I'll let them say hi to you, and then we'll turn the mic over to them for their presentation, and then we're going to follow that with a Q&A from the audience. Now we're going to wrap up the event with a panel discussion with our three speakers, and we'll also have Jeff Schaffer from Unifund join us. So if this all sounds good to you, then let's get things started here. Now, on to the panel. So in the last two webinars, we've done this similar part of the agenda where we bring our speakers back together, and then we have them field a couple of canned questions that we had prepared, and then also open it up for the audience for their questions as well, too, for anybody. And this week, what we're going to do is we're going to introduce Jeff Schaffer, and as I think all the speakers have mentioned Jeff here. He's a legend around here at UC, and as I mentioned, he is a Tableau Zen Master. He's an expert in applying data visualizations to create insights and competitive advantage. Mr. Schaffer is an adjunct here at UC. And he's a regular speaker at conferences and symposiums, universities, and corporate training programs, all on the topic of data visualization. He is a guru. Jeff currently serves as the Vice President of Information Technology and Analytics at Unifund. So let's see. First thing I need to do is encourage everybody to convert on over to the grid mode. I think it's called grid mode, isn't it? I think so.
Grid
view. Yep. And by doing that, you then be able to bring up all of the panelists. And I guess if Chantilly, Chloe, and Steve, yep, come back on up here. Start your video on up. There we go. And Steve, there we go. All right. Well, with that, I'm going to turn it on over to Jeff, and he's going to kick off the panel and lead the discussion.
Thank you very much, Glenn. Every time you introduce me, I always want to get my mother-in-law on the phone just so she can hear that spiel and, hear what that's like. But anyway, behind every successful man is an equally astonished mother-in-law. So that's what they say. I had to laugh when I saw the topic of our discussions today was around visualizing unexpected events and thinking about what's happened this year. It's almost like, how do you visualize something when everything's unexpected? We started the year with COVID, just to set the stage here. I think everybody's aware. We had, the COVID pandemic that sent all kinds of things into spirals. We've had record unemployment things. We've seen charts that send unemployment numbers off the charts into unexpected ways. We've seen mortgage rates collapse into historic lows. We've seen we had murder hornets for a couple of weeks, and then we were on to mass protests around the country for other events, and then just in the last couple of weeks, I guess we got the COVID sequel. So there's a lot to talk about here. I guess I want to just approach all of those things and just ask the panel some broad questions about, should we be visualizing this data? Steve touched on it, Chantilly touched on it. Get some more thoughts around, as non-domain experts. We're not public health experts. We're not. We don't have our medical degree. And so should we be visualizing this data? And maybe I'll just go in order of our presenters. Maybe start with Steve and get your thoughts on that.
Well, I feel a little differently about COVID data now than I did 3 more months ago. Certainly, you should visualize it to get a better understanding of it. The question is, should you publish it? And that could be, you could potentially do a lot of harm. And when this stuff first hit, people were rightfully panicking, unsure, and I absolutely admonished colleagues, unless you really know what you're talking about, you could be spreading misinformation, you could be doing harm. So at least collaborate with someone who knows a lot about this before you publish this. And I had seen some really misleading, and I think, had it been amplified, very damaging data visualizations. At this point, I feel a little differently about the COVID data, in that the data sets have at this point are robust. They've been vetted, and I've seen the state of Georgia drop the ball, and a resident kind of picking it up and doing a better job than the state of Georgia to provide useful information. I don't want to take up too much time, but this is also an opportunity for us to collaborate with others. I'm speaking, in particular with visualizing data around racism. By the way, we have a lot more data about that. We have at least 401 years of that for the United States versus maybe 4 or 5 months of COVID data here. And it's an opportunity where you don't necessarily have to be the voice, but maybe you can amplify the voice of somebody else and collaborate with them and help them be heard. One of my concerns is, if I'm publishing something, is what I have to say more important than what somebody else has to say? And people may look at my stuff. Maybe I'm better off retweeting their stuff.
Chloe, I know on your platform, people collaborate a lot, and almost in all cases, it's not a general topic. It's something with an organization or something that has a real world impact. So, I mean, if people didn't visualize it, you wouldn't be able to have an impact. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I want to go back to the analogy about you are just like an entrepreneur starting a product. But if you're going to visualize for a topic like COVID, the product you're creating is more like healthcare, like drugs. It's something that could potentially directly impact people. So again, I think it's extremely important. The first step, you have to empathize it, collect information, and to achieve 2 things. One is, do you really understand the needs? And also second, to make sure that the information you're going to display is correct. And once you really go through that empathize spaces, you feel ready to share something. I think second thing is, just like any other product, you want to do A/B testing. You want to start with some small scale. So if you really think that you got the good needs, good information, something additional to share, maybe you could share with your mentor, someone you close to double check your work is actually good, it's actually helpful, and then scale up and to share with more people. So really to think about the risk and the consequence you might be able to make, and then start with something more like a small scale set, so that the risk is much more manageable initially.
Yes, Chantilly, I know you did some redesigns of the COVID dashboards on your Tableau public page that I was looking at earlier. A couple of them, I don't know if it got visit of the day or just went viral. You have a couple that almost have 50,000 views on there. So what prompted you to take on that data and do that redesign?
So originally, when the first series of Tableau starter workbooks were published by Tableau, They were providing information on active cases, confirmed cases, recovered cases, and then deaths. And that data was being sourced directly from Johns Hopkins. And I would say like a month in, the data was transformed to take out those active cases and the recovered cases. However, the data was still being provided by Johns Hopkins. So the reason I did a bit of a redesign was because I wanted to incorporate that data that was still out there, but was being excluded from the original data set. So that's why I went the route of scrubbing the data the best way possible. I actually went and validated the data, well, my scrubbing methods with, some experts in the field, and then recreated some visualizations and published them out. Even though the visualizations have kind of taken off, I've stopped updating that data and tried to focus my visualization efforts now to some of the more recent current events that are going on in the world, especially like around diversity and whatnot, and trying to help organizations start to better understand their metrics and where they can start to bridge that gap internally in terms of diversity.
Yeah, I remember when the recovered field dropped out of that original data, it broke my dashboard. I remember that, and contacting you on how you were gathering that data. Chantilly, great segue into the next topic is if we're being careful with that data and as Steve said, maybe you visualize the COVID data but don't publish it. Do we have the same feeling about the racial inequality data? Is it because that we have 400 years of that data that it's different, or is it the topic that makes it different? But don't we feel that we all should probably be visualizing that data more to bring a voice to it? Maybe I'll go backwards and start with Chantilly this time.
Absolutely. I definitely think that data should be visualized. However, I caution individuals who are visualizing that data to first do your research. Last week, I had a conversation on Twitter with Kate Brown. She's one of the Tableau prep kind of gurus in the community, and she was doing a Black Lives Matter project with the Boston user group, and she wanted to make sure that the individuals understood the importance or the seriousness of this data set. And I like the fact that Kate only provided 5 data points for the individuals to use. And the reason she provided a very small data set was because she wanted them to not just plot a point on a map, but really understand the significance and the story behind that data point, right? So when we're visualizing the Black Lives Matter movement and we're visualizing diversity, those data points are people, right? Each of those, that's a human that you're represented. That's a human that might have passed away or died because of police brutality. And you really want to be careful and sensitive around that. So if you're visualizing that information, I definitely say do your research around it and make sure that the visualization that you're portraying has some type of action that you want behind it.
Yeah, that's making it personal, and I mean that even relates to the COVID. I've seen people visualize the COVID data and talk about, oh, the death rate is only this, but those are real people, and that might be somebody's mom or grandmother that they're looking at in a viz, and that can be very personal. Chloe, I know you've touched on many of the diversity has been a hot topic of Viz for Social Good for a long time, and in all kinds of different ways. I'm sure you have thoughts on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Chantilly pretty much touched on the point that I want to share. But from my personal experience, sometimes I do feel to be like completely transparent. Sometimes when I see some of data around gender, around Asian, I just cannot stop feeling that they're using, like, I feel used by those people. So I think, again, it's really important because, like Chantilly mentioned, this is not just data. This is not number. This is about my origin, my story, my emotion and feelings. So it's extremely important to ask meaningful questions and truly understand their story so that when you represent the data, people don't feel that you're just trying to gain another engagement for your visualization. You truly understand my perspective and try to advocate for me.
Yeah. powerful. Steve, I'm sure you have some thoughts on it.
I just wholeheartedly agree with both Chantilly and Chloe, and I'm often concerned about are you intentionally or unintentionally exploiting the situation. So it is essential that you get this right and find colleagues that you trust who have established values and integrity, and ask them to vet this stuff before you publish it to make sure that you are helping the cause and not hurting the cause.
For sure. I'm going to invite Mike back or Glenn to moderate any questions from the audience if we have them.
Sure. Thanks, Jeff. So just as a reminder to the audience, so just make sure if you do have a question for the panel, just type it in and then we'll pass it on. So I'll start with this one. This one's actually my question. I'm going to be selfish here. But multiple ones of you have mentioned the importance of collaboration, right, working with subject matter experts. And actually what really strikes me here is if anyone in the audience or if any of you saw our webinar 2 weeks ago, we had Ed Kaplan, who's a professor of public health and engineering at Yale. He's actually worked on some of the COVID models in terms of trying to figure out what the maximum crowd size should be and the effects of testing and all that kind of stuff. If any of you saw that, and even if Ed's in the audience today, I think he would agree, data visualization is not his strength. I think he violated everything I've tried to learn from Jeff Schaffer in terms of using 3D column charts and things like that. So my question is, do you think, so maybe I'll throw this to Chantilly. So Chantilly, Jeff pointed out you've done some great redesigns of the COVID-19 data. So my question is, do you think that we as a data visualization community, are we doing enough to be at the table with those people building the models so that the data visualization is worked in at the beginning rather than having to do redesign? And if we're not, what else can we do to make sure that somebody like you, like Chloe, like Steve, like Jeff, somebody is there at the table so that we make sure that we're building great models and communicating them in a way that helps decision makers and helps the public?
Absolutely. I definitely think that with any area, right, specifically we're talking about COVID right now, that there needs to be two experts at the table. There needs to be one for the topic at hand, right, so for the research and the data itself, and there needs to be one for the data visualization aspect of it, right? And I think that they both need to work collaboratively at the beginning and throughout the entire process to make sure that what the researcher is trying to portray or the findings that they are trying to provide back to the community is visualized in the best way possible, right? So we're not the experts in the model, we're not the experts in the data, but we are the experts in how we can convey and portray that message. So you want to make sure that both experts have a seat at the table very early on so that message or your intended message at the end is delivered in the best way possible. So I would say I'm not an expert in any industry, and even at Lovelitics, I have a data visualization team. And whenever we have a client who is looking for like some predictive model type of stuff that is going to get transitioned into a data visualization, my team is brought in very early on into that process. And even though I don't understand half the terms that they're saying, when I ask the question, what are you trying to convey? What are you trying to provide back to the audience? And they deliver that message to me. It's now up to me to provide the visualization that's going to best display that.
Thanks. Chloe, maybe I'll throw the same question over to you. So do you have a similar opinion on this? Other things you think that the community should be doing to make sure that we're represented at the decision-making phase?
Yeah, for sure. I can give an example within organization. For example, when I was working at Twitter, oftentimes people think data analyst or data scientist is like has fun working on your visualization or work on your work, and you don't really socialize that much with other people. But I think that's totally wrong, just like you mentioned, because we really have to be in that decision process. We have to be part of the conversation. So I will really encourage ourselves to be more part of the conversation and be really tied with other stakeholders in the business organization. Your job is not just working on visualization. I know it's really fun, but your job is also to take other perspective from other business stakeholders and to see how you can add value and how you can be in the conversation early on.
I'm just want to say I've been incredibly frustrated by certain governments not taking advantage of people with great expertise who are volunteering their services. I charge an F ton on an hourly rate, and I'm saying I have contacted New York State government, New York City government, where I was able to do some help, and other governments, and saying, look, you've got this stuff. There are better ways to relate this. Georgia Lupi did a whole redesign of all the stuff that Cuomo was presenting, and it's a little frustrating that there are some people who want to do some really helpful work, and this would be the ideal collaboration, by the way, and it's not happening. And I think, Jeff, you mentioned the same situation in Ohio, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm sorry they're not taking advantage. Some people would like to help.
Yeah, actually, Jeff, why don't you chime in here? Anything you want to add?
I think when it works, when we've seen it work, the collaboration is key. It reminds me of, you look at a job ad and they say they want somebody with experience in SQL and R and HTML and programming and C++ and Tableau, and you think to yourself, who is this person that you're trying to hire? And so when you step back, I think it's broader than even just this scenario. Even in your organizations, getting your visualizer together with your SMEs. In whatever field, it doesn't have to be public health or COVID data. It can be, in your day-to-day operations. I think getting those people to talk is key to getting the right deliverable out.
Thanks. This is a question from the audience, and I think it's a little bit similar to something I think I asked Steve. So I'll throw this one to Chloe. So Chloe, the question is, what method do you use to understand whether or not the visualization you design includes too much detail for the audience?
Yeah, so I think, again, back to the analogy about starting a product. At the end of the day, you're not creating product for yourself. You're creating product for someone else. So I think it's really hard for yourself to answer that question. So in order to understand if that's too much information or too little information, you have to work with the people to first understand their perspective, and second, to really observe how they interact with the visualization. And I think gathering those extra qualitative information would be really helpful and sometimes very obvious to see if your visualization is too much or too little.
And Chantilly, how about for you? I know you mentioned you like to start with pretty simple things, bar charts, column charts, line charts, because that's what people understand. How do you make sure you're not including too much information for the audience?
I think typically in a consultant, I'm speaking in a consultant aspect, I always start with the user, right? And exactly what they're looking for. So 9 times out of 10, I'm not just creating a visualization just because. I'm starting with my key stakeholders. I'm understanding their requirements. I'm prioritizing their requirements. I'm collecting the data to see if the data supports it. And then I'm creating the visualization, the best visualization, to try to convey that information back to them. So I think that's how I get around making sure that I present the right amount of information back to the end user.
Great, thanks. So I think this will be our final question, then I'll turn it over to Glenn. So actually, Steve, I'm going to throw this one to you. So you actually mentioned that sometimes that people should be designing a visualization, they maybe not publishing it, right? And I think the way I like to think about this is data visualization can be used for exploration and explanation. Pretty much everything we've talked about today has been how to best explain data with a visualization, right, for an audience. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that other piece, exploration. So what types of things do you think are most effective when you're just trying to visualize data as an analyst to understand the data yourself, maybe not even explain it to someone?
Well, that's what I think one of the purposes of the dashboard is. That after months, Jeff, Andy, and I came up with a dashboard is a visual display of data used to monitor conditions and or facilitate understanding. And it may be, I'm just using this so that I can understand what I've got here. Are there flaws in my data? Where are there things that need attention that haven't gotten attention? That dashboard may never see the light of day outside of this workstation here, but I found something that is useful. What am I going to do with that? Well, it may be story points. It may be a PowerPoint presentation. It may be another dashboard, but I'm using it as to explore the data. And I think one of the reasons that we have all like Tableau so much is it allows you to interrogate the data very quickly.